Every year, Which tests thousands of the products that you rely on every day. And we've been doing it for over 60 years.
Which reviews are 100% impartial. We don't accept freebies from manufacturers, and we have no owners, shareholders or government departments to answer to. So our work is on behalf of you, the consumer.
In a world of misleading claims and fake reviews, we test everything, from everyday items to big purchases, so that you don't have to.
We then put them through tests and assessments that go beyond the accepted standard to work out how well these products work for you and what's not worth your money. And a Which membership not only gets you access to our reviews, it also funds our non-profit campaigning work, like getting scam ads banned on social media and ending broadband and mobile mid-contract price hikes. And right now, podcast listeners can become a Which member for 50% off the usual price by heading to which.co.uk/podcast offer. Food prices are on the up, with inflation at 3.3% in February. So what can you do to beat the supermarkets, minimise waste and keep your costs down? I'm Lucia Ariano and this is Which Money. Welcome to the show. Now, joining us to get into plenty more detail, we have Which senior researcher and supermarket expert, Ellie Simmonds.
Hello.
And also you might know her as the full freezer online. It's home food waste expert, Kate Hall. Welcome, Kate.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you both so much for joining us today. So as we go through today's show, we'll be hearing plenty of ways we can get the most out of the food we buy, and all about Kate's viral full freezer method, something that I personally am very excited to hear because my freezer is in desperate need of some help for sure. But first, shall we set the scene? So I mentioned rising food prices at the start. Ellie, talk us through it. I mean, are there any particular foods pushing up inflation at the moment, or are we seeing rises across the board?
Yeah, there are definitely some foods that are pushing up inflation more than others, and some that are going up much faster than others. And sadly, for people with a sweet tooth like me, and coming up to Easter, chocolate is one of them.
I've noticed that one.
Yeah, inflation on chocolate is quite high. It was about 14% last time we checked, and we're going to check again relatively soon. So I think it may have gone up even more. So yeah, 14% for chocolate, and other foods that have gone up are olive oil, coffee, and butters and spreads as well.
Some real kind of daily essentials there. And Kate, I know that the cost of food shopping was one of the reasons you started what is now the wonderful world of the full freezer. For our listeners who aren't familiar with your work, firstly, could you introduce yourself and what you're about?
Absolutely. So as you said, I work as the full freezer online, and I create content essentially around how we can use our freezers more effectively. So obviously, most of us are familiar with the idea of using our freezers for shop bought products or for batch cooking. And when we were going through a bit of a tight spot with our finances, I had a light bulb moment and basically realised that instead of ending up with those well-intentioned foods that I bought, meaning to batch cook at the time, I had two very small children and sort of fell off the wagon, shall we say, with my organisation, that I could just press pause on foods. So I think considering how much food average households are throwing away across the UK, it's one of those things that if we can just shift our habits around looking at those individual items of food that are always going to waste and whether we can get them into the freezer instead and use them at a later date, it can make a huge difference. And essentially making those changes in my own house has led to me writing a book about it. So there's the Full Freezer Method book, and speaking to people such as yourselves and doing segments on TV to just share these really simple little tricks that can really shift and really, I think, reposition our habits so that we are less wasteful and we can save so much money this way.
I saw quite a few of those tricks on your Instagram today, so I'm excited to get through. I'm sure we'll get through plenty of them today. Kate mentioned there a few items that went up by the most recently. So, chocolate, olive oil, spreads, coffee. Are any of those items that you can freeze?
I mean, you could actually freeze all of them. With chocolate, I wouldn't really recommend it, if I'm totally honest, just because it is such a temperature sensitive item. You have got that risk of blooming and, it just the texture changing, and you can really damage the quality. If you did want to freeze some chocolate, if you get some for Easter and you want it to last that bit longer, particularly with, the hoards that our kids get, then just make sure that you're putting it in the fridge first. So you lower the temperature down to fridge level, and then you move it to the freezer. And then when you want to eat it, ideally you want to move it back to the fridge and then out to room temperature. But things like oil, you can absolutely freeze. I wouldn't freeze it in the bottle because obviously it's going to expand. I would go with ice cubes. But again, it's something that's these items have got quite long shelf lives anyway. So unless maybe if you're a fan of filter coffee or doing cafetières or things like that, if you've made too much coffee and you can't drink it all, certainly that's one that I would pop into ice cube trays, and then I'd make iced coffee with it later. So there's things we can do.
And butter and spreads, is that something that you can freeze?
Yes, absolutely. The butter and spreads actually is a really, really good one. And I saw a fantastic offer the other day and ended up buying practically half a shelf of butter because I knew that I could freeze it. You do need to think about how you're going to use it at the other end. So ideally you want to portion it up in some way so that it's not going to be a case of waiting, hours, days for a block of butter to defrost in your fridge, because it is going to take a while to defrost. It's quite useful as well to think about if you want things like herby butters, then you could actually, if you've got some herbs left over, you can mix them with the butter and freeze that in ice cubes so you can use that in your cooking.
Well, we'll be getting into plenty more tips, I'm sure, and I hope, to make the most of your food you buy as we go. But shall we rewind a bit first? Ellie, shopping in the supermarkets. Now, you compare every month all the supermarkets to find the cheapest. So what's the latest here? And have you noticed a bump in costs overall with inflation?
Yeah, we compare hundreds of products every month across 8 big supermarkets to find where the price differences are, how much people can save by switching where they shop. And we do that every month. The most recent results show that Aldi was the cheapest. Aldi's actually now been cheapest for well over a year, every month consecutively for well over a year. And Lidl tends to come in very kind of tight second place. So Lidl's not far behind at all. But there are big costs, and obviously inflation in the supermarkets was a really big thing a year or two ago, and it was running at 17-18%. We do a inflation tracker every quarter here at Which, where we look at thousands of products and how much they've gone up in price year on year. And actually, the last time we ran the tracker, which was just before Christmas, it showed an uptick in supermarket food inflation for the first time in 20 months. So it does show that perhaps it's not completely over yet, and that shoppers do still need to be careful. And that goes to show the importance of switching supermarkets if you are trying to save money on your supermarket shop.
And what kinds of things are we comparing when we compare, Aldi, Lidl, Tesco, etc.? In
terms of the cheapest supermarket, we're comparing a wide variety of popular products that are available across all those supermarkets. So everything from Hovis sliced bread, Cathedral City cheese, and other basics like own label milk, butter, spreads, jams, fruit and veg, meat, ham, eggs, all of the things that you would expect to find in a fairly regular supermarket shop.
And the quarterly research, that's, as you said, thousands of products. So that's, really broad.
It's thousands. It's about, I think, 26,000 products every time we run it. And that's across 20 popular kind of categories of supermarket food and drink, everything from chocolate to cheese, bakery products, meat products, and we look at everything we can in those categories that's comparable year on year at those supermarkets. So, every single meat product that's comparable year on year in those supermarkets.
And do you find it concerning then that, as you said, over 20 months in our last piece of research we published on this, there was an uptick?
Yeah, I do think it's a bit concerning that we've seen an uptick then, and then there are also kind of wider headwinds coming with minimum wage increases, national insurance increases, and there's a packaging tax coming in as well. The British Retail Consortium and supermarkets have all warned that prices are likely to go up again because of those things, and they've not even come into effect yet. So I do think that's a bit of a worry. And there are other things that we can point to too. So, for example, when the cost of living crisis really hit and supermarket prices were going up really rapidly, butters and spreads was one of the first types of foods to really see a huge spike in costs. And that came down actually before everything else, which is interesting. So it kind of peaked before everything else. It was ahead of the curve, if you like. But actually butters and spreads we've started to see go up again recently. So it shows that perhaps things are not as stable as we might hope, and that things are ticking up in terms of their prices.
And Kate, as somebody in the food industry, I mean, is this something you're noticing, the cost of food going up? Is there anything that we've mentioned that's maybe a surprise or that's kind of felt prominent for you?
What I have found really interesting is that as the cost of living crisis has continued and food inflation has continued, there are some people who've shifted their habits, and they're looking at trying to tackle their food waste as a way to sort of overcome this. But for a lot of people, even though they're aware of their food shopping going up and the costs and everything, they're still finding it really difficult to actually rein in the wastage, which is something that we obviously want to really help to support people to do.
And would you say you've changed the way you shop, or that you shop differently to the average person?
I probably do, yes. I mean, I know that there tends to be two ends of the scale, where you have people who will usually do a weekly shop or a monthly shop, and they are really hot on food planning, meal planning, all of those things. And then there tend to be the more sort of casual, flying last minute, stopping in on the shop on the way home and things like that.
That's me. I'm the second one. Ellie, which are you?
I'm the first, but my husband's the second, so that's a bit tricky.
Well, and I think the thing is that we tend to think that the meal planning is always the better, whereas actually it can be a bit of a compromise of the two. So in our house, the way that things tend to work is that I will tend to shop online, because I find if I go into a shop, even if I go in with a list, I am absolutely going to buy more than I actually need. And I won't do it regularly though. So I will wait until we cannot cope anymore, basically. So I try very hard to basically shop from our kitchen, to shop from our cupboards and our fridge and our freezer, and the freezer especially. I actually keep an inventory of what's in the freezer on my phone in the form of photographs, so I can see exactly what I've got, how much of it I've got, how old it is. And that enables me to very quickly have a look and say, right, I'm going to start with, planning a meal. This is the protein I'm using. Have a look in the vegetables section, vegetables folder. What veggies do we want with it, and so on and so forth. And then occasionally we'll have to supplement. We do tend to buy things like milk and berries for the kids, like fruit for the kids' lunch boxes, things like that. We will pick up throughout the week, and there might be sort of 2 or 3 trips to the local convenience store, which again I know is not the most cost effective, but for things like berries, because I know if I make the trip to the bigger supermarket, I'm going to spend even more. So it's very much a compromise for us, but the key thing is that things are not ending up in the bin.
Wow, I mean, this is mind-blowing stuff to me. I don't know about you, Ellie, but this couldn't be further away from my freezer. I'm just sitting here thinking how awful it is that I've got a Tupperware full of wedding cake that's been in the freezer, I think, 2 years. I'm not going to say it's been in there longer than that, but it could be. I definitely want to take on board some of these tips. Ellie, does this sound like something that you've ever tried or?
Sadly not. I would love to be able to try some of that stuff. My freezer is the complete opposite of that. I took out a bag of breaded scampi the other day and realised that it went off in 2022. So yeah, that's more the state of my freezer. And I've got various things in there unlabelled that I'm not quite sure. There's a Tupperware thing of soup. I'm not sure when that went in there or in fact what flavour it is.
Well, after a quick break, we'll be back with plenty more tricks and supermarket insights after this.
Saving for retirement can feel daunting. The same goes for managing your money once you've stopped working. That's why we've created an 8-week newsletter series breaking down what you need to consider, both pre and post-retirement, into bite-sized chunks. If you sign up to our free retirement newsletters, for 8 weeks we'll send you an email full of expert guidance to help you take control of your retirement planning and give you the confidence to make smart decisions. We'll help you get to grips with your pension, teach you how to boost your income, and explain more about care options. It doesn't matter when you sign up either. Your 8 weeks of advice will start whenever you sign up. So what are you waiting for? Head to which.co.uk/retirement newsletters, all one word, to get up to speed on everything you need to know for retirement.
Welcome back to the show. Now, let's dive into getting the most out of supermarkets. Which is the best? Which is the worst? Ellie, you have the answer to this, don't you?
I do have the answer to this, thanks to about 3,000 people that we surveyed. So every year we do a big best and worst supermarket survey, and we survey thousands of people who have used supermarkets, and we ask them about everything relating to their experience of supermarkets, so value for money, quality of products, the customer service they get when they're in the supermarkets, queuing time, what the delivery driver was like. We ask them everything to really bring you the kind of definitive guide to the best places to do your supermarket shop. And we look at online and in store as well. So we've got the results just in for this year, and Marks and Spencer's was the best place to shop in store, and Ocado and Tesco were the best places to shop online.
So why were these the best places to shop then?
So shoppers really love M&S. I think they see it as a treat. They love its products. I think that probably will come as no surprise to anyone that shopped in M&S, is that the quality of what it sells is really nice. One customer said to us it was a real treat to shop in M&S. Great quality products that I don't mind spending a bit more on. And I think that's kind of the message really, is that people like shopping in M&S. It gives them a nice feeling. It's a lovely treat.
M&S picky bits, I think we're all familiar with that term as a treat.
Yeah. And I think people do recognise that it's perhaps not the cheapest supermarket to shop in. But I think if you know that and that's your kind of expectation, then people don't mind it so much.
And what about Tesco and Ocado? Yeah,
Tesco's an interesting one because it, a few years ago it wasn't one of the supermarkets that people really talked about as a kind of aspirational place to shop, but it's really kind of come back this year as a good place to shop. It's, as I said, at the top of the table for shopping online, up there with Ocado, and for in-store it comes second in the table, and it's a good all-rounder. It's maybe not as cheap as Aldi and Lidl, but it's one of the cheaper supermarkets generally. You can get a full range of items there, unlike Aldi and Lidl where their range is limited. In Tesco, you tend to get lots of products, a full range, everything you want in one shop. And it's kind of strength in breadth. It's good in store, it's good online, and people like it. It does what it does pretty well.
And what about with us talking about food waste so much on today's show? Do any of the supermarkets come out top when it comes to freshness?
So M&S is the only supermarket that comes out with 5 stars, so that's a maximum 5 stars for the overall quality of its own label and fresh products. So that really speaks to the fact that shoppers really love the stuff that they buy in M&S.
It's really interesting, actually. I was having a conversation with my dad the other day about doing an online shop, and he was very anti the idea because he didn't think the stuff would be as fresh, basically. And I'd like to ask you about this, Kate. When it comes to shopping, do you notice certain supermarkets, in your experience, having fresher food, or is this a consideration of yours when you're shopping?
I mean, to be honest, I don't worry about it hugely because I know that I can freeze everything. So I do find that, as you say, there are some supermarkets where you feel more confident that things like fresh berries or those kinds of items are going to last better. But generally speaking, I would look at what do I actually need, and just buy with the confidence that if it arrives, if it looks like it's not going to last more than 2 or 3 days, then I will freeze it. I have had personal instances of things showing up not from any one particular shop, because I have experimented with ordering from Tesco, from Ocado, from Morrison's. Like I've tried all the different shops. I'm not particularly loyal to one brand. And I have had instances where, a pack of peppers has arrived and literally you could put your thumb through it. But I have found generally all of the supermarkets, their customer service is pretty good with, refunding in those instances. But it does cause a problem, because then you don't have the fruit or the veg that you'd ordered. So, I think from sort of the reliability, I can completely understand people wanting to go into store to see the fruits, see the vegetables, and have more confidence. And I think there's a question there as well in terms of obviously a lot of the supermarkets have removed the best before dates on fruits and vegetables, which is fantastic from a sustainability perspective of encouraging people to use their senses. But I have had a lot of people sort of in my community who've expressed that they don't feel like the fruits and veg are as fresh as they were. Now, whether there's anything to that, I have no idea. But I very much lean into the perspective of, because I know I can prep things for the freezer and then just cook them from frozen, or use the fruits in a smoothie, or eat them frozen, then we're not that kind of tied to having to get into store to buy things.
You just made me think of, actually, when you were talking about the peppers there, of a video I saw on your Instagram, how to revive bendy veg. What's the secret?
Yes. Oh, it's magical. I've got some lettuce in my fridge, which I've popped in some cold water today, because it wasn't mouldy. There was nothing wrong with it, but it was a bit sad looking, and all it needs is a drink. So things like, particularly things like lettuce, carrots, broccoli, leeks, celery. If you have got any of those items of veg that are just looking a bit sad, you just trim off, the bottom, the top, wherever, and submerge it in ice cold water, and it will help to rehydrate it, and you can bring it back to life. So yeah, it's very, very handy. So it's a good one.
And Ellie, just to go back to the survey results, no shop's got 5 stars for value for money. Is that, going back to the top of the show, is that because of inflation, do you think?
I think so, yeah. I think shoppers feel the pinch when they go to the supermarket. I think year-on-year inflation may not be what it was a year or two ago, but people are still paying an awful lot more now for their groceries than they were 3 or 4 years ago. And I think people really see it. When you have bottles of popular olive oil doubling in price in 2 years, coffee doubling in price, there's lots of stuff, and people, I think, are very conscious when they go around the supermarket of what they're paying and what the bill will be when they get through the checkout at the end. So yeah, I think that's absolutely what it is.
Well, we've talked a lot on previous podcasts where we're diving into supermarkets on ways to save on your bill, and we should definitely get a link to some of those advice guides in the description of today's show notes. But just to wrap up then for today, I feel like maybe we could just end with some more surprising tips from you, Kate. We've heard so many already, but anything that surprises people most that you can freeze, or kind of nifty ways to freeze, like bacon. I feel like I've just gone through your Instagram this morning. I was working as well, but nifty ways to freeze bacon caught my eye as well.
Yeah, that one's gone a little bit viral. When it comes to bacon, instead of the usual thing that we would have done growing up of just slinging the pack into the freezer and then having to defrost it or chip away at it, now if I open a pack of bacon and there's some left over, because we don't eat it very much, I will roll the slices, and then either almost kind of, because it's usually streaky bacon that we have with pancakes and fruit and things, so I'll usually actually just put it back into the pack it was in the rolled kind of position, and then freeze that away from any ready-to-eat foods, just to avoid any cross-contamination, and then just store it in a freezer bag. And then when I want to cook with it, I literally just grab however many pieces we want and either pop it into the pan or into the air fryer. And as it starts to cook, it will start to unfurl, and you can encourage it a bit with a fork so that it doesn't end up with one end cooked and one end not. But because it's so thin, you can just cook it from frozen. You can obviously tell when it is cooked from frozen, when it is cooked through. Other things that tend to surprise people, things like eggs. So I actually shared a reel yesterday because I was in the fridge at the weekend and the box of eggs fell out and onto the floor. I did lose one egg, which, I was very sad about. That went straight onto the floor, so I wasn't scraping that one up. But the other, there were another 2 eggs in the box, and one of them, the shell broke. So I basically just cracked both of them out of the shells, whisked them up, and then I frozen those flat in a freezer bag, again, because it'll take up very little space, but also because it means I can defrost it very quickly. So in a dish of cold water, 2 eggs would take about 10 minutes to defrost. And then that can be used in baking. It can be used to make omelette, frittata, whatever it is, as long as it's cooked through thoroughly. You can't do runny eggs when they've been frozen, because you just want to make sure that you're cooking it through and killing off any bacteria. But yeah, eggs is one that tends to surprise. Nuts I keep in the freezer.
Really?
Yeah, because they're high in fat, they can turn rancid in the cupboard. Once they combine with warm temperatures, it encourages those fats to turn rancid. So if we keep them in the freezer, it just helps them to last that bit longer. And you can literally just eat them straight from the freezer. Obviously, be careful of your teeth if you have got sensitive or delicate teeth. And then really just leftovers from tins for me is one of my favourite things of kind of flagging up to people. So often I have used half a tin of something, and in the past I would have put it into the fridge, go in a Tupperware in the fridge, and then like a week later I'd realise that I hadn't used those kidney beans or the chickpeas or whatever it might be. So now those kinds of items will always get drained and then frozen open on the tray and then moved into a freezer bag and then just from the freezer chucked into whatever I'm cooking. So I always know that I can just add as much as I want as well. I don't have to use it all.
Wow, fascinating stuff. I feel like we've got the Marie Kondo of minimising food waste and freezer organisation with us in the building today. It's been a fascinating show. Ellie, do you want to just leave us with any final advice on supermarket shopping, saving on your supermarket, wherever you'd like to leave us today?
Yeah, I think the best advice is to switch supermarkets. If you're looking to save money, you can make real savings by switching supermarkets, shopping around. And I think there's been some really good tips here about freezing food, making lists. Shopping online is another good tip that Kate said. So yeah, I think all those tips are really great for saving money. And I think my personal takeaway has been that some people might need to freeze chocolate because they don't eat it as quickly as obviously I do.
Yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to need to freeze crisps in my house, I have to say. But there definitely are many tips that I will take away with me today. Well, thank you both. It's been a great episode. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this podcast from Which, the UK's consumer champion. You can find plenty more advice about what we discussed today in the show notes. There you'll also find a link to become a Which member for 50% off the usual price, an offer exclusively available to you, our podcast listeners. Joining Which will not only give you access to our product reviews, our app, one-to-one personalised buying advice, and every issue of Which magazine across the year, but you'll also be helping us to make life simpler, fairer and safer for everyone. Don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you're listening. That way you'll be notified whenever we release a new episode of Which Money, Which Shorts, or any other podcast that we make for you. And if you want to get in touch with us, then follow us on social media at Which UK or drop us an email to podcast@which.co.uk. See you next time.
Leaking roof? Car won't start? Needs to renovate? Here's what to look for when getting a trader to help. A recognised endorsement, where expert assessors set the bar high. Genuine customer reviews, so you don't get duped by cowboy fakers. A clear code of conduct to give you an extra layer of security. A robust complaints policy, so you can resolve disputes fairly. And the Which Trusted Trader badge that says choose me with confidence. You can trust Which to help you find the right traders for the job. We run thorough checks on traders, put them through in-depth assessments, then we give them the actions to make improvements and only endorse them when they've actioned them and made the grade. So, to choose with confidence, head to which.co.uk/traders or search for Which Trusted Traders.